Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture a scene, and honestly, it feels less like history and more like the opening shot of a disaster movie. It is the spring of 430 A.D. We are in North Africa, specifically in the city of Hippo Regius, which is, what, modern-day Annaba in Algeria.
That's the one. And the situation is absolutely dire.
Dire is almost too soft a word for it. It's an apocalypse.
It really is. The city is under siege.
Right. The Vandals are at the gates, and we aren't talking about graffiti artists here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a Germanic tribe that has migrated all the way from Central Europe, down through Spain, across the Strait of Gibraltar, and is now just tearing through North Africa.
They're burning, looting, and destroying everything in their path. The Roman Empire, I mean, the structure that held the world together for centuries is collapsing in real time.
It's the end of an era.
It really is. And inside the city walls, amidst all the panic and the starvation, we zoom in on the cathedral library. And there is a 75-year-old man lying on his deathbed.
And he knows the end is coming. Not just for him personally, but, potentially for his entire civilization.
Exactly. And his reaction to this impending doom is, well, it's profound. He hasn't asked for a sword. He hasn't asked to be evacuated.
No.
He has requested that the penitential Psalms of David be copied out on large sheets of paper and hung on the walls of his room.
So he can just stare at them.
He wants to stare at them and weep while he dies.
He's essentially excommunicated himself in his final days, hasn't he? He's shut himself off from his friends and advisors to stand in solidarity with sinners.
Which is such a heavy, symbolic way to go out. And the man, of course, is Augustine. Oh. Augustine of Hippo.
The subject of today's deep dive. And I think for a lot of people, when they hear the name St. Augustine, they kind of zone out.
I think that's fair.
They think of a stained glass window or maybe a dusty theology book they were forced to read in a Western Civ class. But the guy dying in that room while the barbarians are literally banging on the gates, he is arguably the architect of the Western mind.
Without a doubt. If you have ever wondered why we think about time the way we do as a psychological experience, or why we have this concept of a deep, introspective inner self, or how we understand the ethics of war or memory or even human desire, if you pull on those threads, they almost all lead back to this one man in North Africa.
So our mission today is to figure out how a wild youth from the provinces, who spent his teenage years stealing pears and hanging out with a rowdy crowd, became the Doctor of Grace.
It's quite a transformation.
We're going to look at his massive dossier, his biography, his letters, his theological treatises, and we're going to try to understand the man behind the halo. Because, spoiler alert, he was a man who struggled violently with ambition, with lust, and with the total collapse of the world around him.
And what's fascinating here is that his life bridges two worlds. He lives right at the hinge point. He is a man of the ancient classical world, but he's the one who lays the foundation for the Middle Ages.
He's Roman to his core.
To his core.
Yeah.
But he has to watch Rome die.
So let's start at the beginning. Before he was the Bishop of Hippo, he was just Aurelius Augustus, born in 354 A.D. in Thagaste.
Which is also in modern-day Algeria. Fougaras, I believe.
Right. And one thing that really stood out to me in the research is his identity. We often see these paintings of him looking like a medieval European monk, but that's not accurate, is it?
No, it's really not. Scholars generally agree that Augustine and his family were Berbers, the indigenous people of North Africa.
Okay.
But, and this is a key nuance, they were heavily Romanized.
Well, what does that look like in practice for a family in the 4th century?
It means they lived in a cultural hybrid. They were African by blood, but Roman by culture. They spoke Latin at home. It was a matter of pride and dignity for them.
A status symbol.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Augustine's family belonged to the class of Venestior's honorable men. They weren't super ripped senators, but they had local status. They were Roman citizens. So culturally, he's fully immersed in the Latin world.
It's almost like a colonial dynamic, isn't it? The local elite adopting the manners and the language of the empire?
Very much so. In fact, Augustine mentions later that he loved Latin literature, Virgil, Cicero, but he absolutely hated Greek.
That part made me laugh. He said he never mastered Greek because his teacher beat the students.
Exactly. He called the teacher brutal. It's such a human detail. Here is one of the greatest intellects in history, a man who wrote millions of words, and he admits he rebelled against learning Greek because he associated the language with physical pain.
He basically said, you can't force me to learn.
He says, curiosity is a better teacher than compulsion. It's a great line.
So we have this Roman African upbringing. And we have to talk about his parents, because to talk about a mixed marriage, This household sounds intense.
It was a very complex dynamic. His mother, Monica, which is actually a Berber name, was a devout Christian. And when I say devout, I mean intense.
Right.
She was a dominant figure in his life, hovering over him, praying for him constantly, worrying about his soul.
And the dad?
Patricius.
His father, Patricius, was a pagan, a man of the old world. He didn't convert to Christianity until he was on his deathbed. So he wasn't concerned with Augustine's soul.
Not really. He was much more concerned with Augustine's worldly success, his rhetoric career, his social standing. So Augustine grows up in this house where the old gods and the new faith are sort of living side by side, but Monica is definitely the driving spiritual force.
So he's smart. He's obviously gifted. He's sent off to school in Midorus at age 11. But then, at age 16, he has to come home.
Right, the money runs out. His father's ambitions were bigger than his wallet. He has to spend a year in Thagaste while his father scrounges up enough cash to send him to Carthage. This is his gap year.
And like many 16-year-olds with too much time and no supervision, he gets into trouble.
He does.
This brings us to the famous pear incident.
The pear incident, yeah.
I have to be honest, when I first read about this in his autobiography, The Confessions, I thought, really? You stole some fruit? It seems so minor. He acts like he committed some heinous crime.
He treats it with incredible gravity.
But he spends chapters analyzing this one moment. Why?
Yeah.
Why is this so important to him?
It does seem trivial on the surface, but if we connect this to the bigger picture of his philosophy, it's actually the key to understanding his entire view of the human condition. It's a breakthrough moment for him, looking back.
So set the scene for us.
He's 16. He's hanging out with a group of friends, what he calls a gang of wreckers, what we might call a bad crowd.
Right.
And there is a pear tree in a neighbor's garden. It's not even a particularly good pear tree. In the middle of the night, they decide to jump the fence, shake the tree, and steal huge loads of pears.
Okay, standard teenage vandalism.
But here is the twist. This is the part that haunts him for the rest of his life. Augustine wasn't hungry. He says explicitly that he had better pears at home in his own cellar.
And they didn't even eat them?
No, they took a few bites and threw the rest to the pigs.
So it wasn't theft for survival, it wasn't even theft for profit or pleasure?
No, and that is what floors him when he thinks about it later. He asks himself again and again, why did I do it? And he realizes he did it just to do it.
For the thrill?
For the thrill of doing something wrong. He writes that he had a perverse desire to break the rules. He loved the sin itself, not the object he gained from it. He loved the destruction.
It's the rebel without a cause thing. What are you rebelling against? What have you got?
Precisely. But for Augustine, this reveals a terrifying truth about human nature. He realizes that sin isn't always about needing something or wanting a good thing in the wrong way. Sometimes it can be a rejection of the higher good, God's law, for a lesser good.
And the lesser good here was, what? Impressing his friends.
That was a huge part of it. The companionship of sinners, he calls it. He realizes he never would have done it alone. He says his shame would not have let him. But with his friends, they could all laugh about it together. It was the shared transgression that was the real high.
That peer pressure element is so relatable. He basically admits he wanted to impress his friends.
Oh, completely. He talks about living a hedonistic lifestyle during this gap year. He associated with these young men who bragged about their sexual exploits.
The wreckers.
Yes. And Augustine, being insecure and wanting to fit in, admits that he would sometimes lie about having sexual experiences just so he wouldn't seem innocent or lame.
He faked a reputation for being a player. That's incredible.
He did. He was terrified of being seen as pure. It really highlights how deep that desire for social acceptance was. He preferred to be thought of as a sinner than to be mocked for being virtuous.
So he's 17 now. His father finally gets the money together with the help of a wealthy patron named Romanianus.
Right.
And he goes to the big city, Carthage.
Carthage was the metropolis of Roman Africa. It was the New York City or London of its day for that region. A place of high learning, but also a place of chaos and pleasure. Augustine calls it a cauldron of illicit loves.
A cauldron. That's a great phrase.
Isn't it?
And this is where he meets a very significant person. We don't know her name, do we?
We don't. She is lost to history, which is a tragedy in itself. But she wasn't just a fling. This is a massive misconception about Augustine's wild years.
People think he was just sleeping around every night.
Exactly. But actually, he enters into a relationship with this woman that lasts for over 15 years.
That's a common law marriage by modern standards?
Essentially. In Roman law, it was concubinage. Because she was likely of a lower social class, or perhaps a freedwoman, he couldn't legally marry her without damaging his career prospects.
Right, he's a rising star.
And a Roman elite marrying a lower-class woman was social suicide. But emotionally, he was faithful to her. It was a monogamous relationship. And they had a son together.
Adeodatus.
Adeodatus, gift from God. That's what the name means. And by all accounts, Augustine loved this boy furiously. He describes him as extremely intelligent, almost frighteningly so. So while Augustine later laments his lust, we have to recognize this was a committed monogamous family unit for a decade and a half.
While he's in Carthage, living this domestic life, but also studying rhetoric to become a lawyer, he has his first intellectual awakening. And surprisingly, it's not the Bible.
No, the Bible was actually a barrier for him at this point. You have to remember, Augustine is a rhetoric snob.
Literary snob.
Completely. He loves the high, polished, complex Latin of Cicero and Virgil. The Latin translations of the Bible available in North Africa at the time were, well, they were rough, they were clunky, they were street Latin.
Like trying to read Shakespeare and then picking up a poorly translated instruction manual?
That is a perfect analogy. And the content Old Testament patriarchs behaving badly, strange genealogies, it seemed crude to him. Immoral, even. He couldn't get past the style to see the substance.
So what did he read that changed things?
He reads a dialogue by Cicero called the Hortensius. It's lost now. We only know about it because Augustine talks about it so much. But reading it sparks this intense thirst for truth. It ignites a love for wisdom in him. He decides he doesn't want to just be a clever lawyer. He wants to be a philosopher.
So if the Bible is out, where does a young, ambitious philosopher in training turn?
He turns to the Manichaeans.
This is a group I feel like we really need to explain because they sound less like a church and more like a sci-fi cult.
It does sound a bit like that from our perspective. Manichaeism was a major world religion at the time. It was a dualistic religion founded by a prophet named Mani in Persia.
And the core belief was what?
They believed the universe was a cosmic battleground between two equal and eternal forces. Light, which was the good, spiritual world, and dark, which was evil, chaotic matter.
And why did that appeal to Augustine so much?
Two main reasons, I think. First, it solved the problem of evil.
The classic question, if God is all good and all powerful, why is there evil? Why do bad things happen?
Exactly. The Manichaeans said, well, God isn't in charge of everything. There's this dark force, matter, that opposes him. Evil happens when the darkness traps particles of light. That got God off the hook.
It's a clean answer. No messy paradoxes.
It is. And the second reason was that they claimed to be scientific. They ridiculed Christians for believing in blind faith. The Manichaeans said, we don't demand faith. We offer knowledge. We have reason.
So what did that knowledge consist of?
They had these elaborate astronomical and astrological explanations for the world eclipses, the phases of the moon, the stars. It was all tied into their mythology about the battle between light and dark. And Augustine, who wanted to be the smart guy who understood the mechanics of the universe, loved that.
He spent 10 years with them.
10 years as an auditor, a low-level follower. He was deep in it. He even converted some of his friends.
But eventually, the cracks start to show.
You do. And this is where his powerful intellect saves him. He starts actually studying the science. He reads genuine Greek astronomers, men like Hipparchus and Eratosthenes, who had calculated the movements of the stars with mathematics.
And he realizes their math works.
It works perfectly, and he sees that the Manichaean books are full of nonsense that contradicts the real science. They were just making it up.
They were faking it.
They were. Augustine calls it swindling. He starts asking hard questions to his local Manichaean leaders. Why doesn't your cosmology match the math? Why are your predictions for eclipses wrong?
And what do they say?
They tell him, wait for Faustus. Faustus of Milan is our great bishop. He's coming to town. He will explain everything.
The great Oz is coming.
The great Oz. And Augustine waits with bated breath for years. He builds this man up in his mind as this fountain of all knowledge.
And when Faust finally shows up,
he's a total disappointment. He's charming. He's a great speaker. He's very polite. But Augustine realizes almost immediately that the man is ignorant. He has no real answers. He just repeats the same old myths.
He's all style, no substance.
Precisely. And that bursts the bubble. Augustine realizes a crucial lesson. Eloquence does not equal truth. You can say something beautifully and still be completely wrong.
That is a lesson that is painfully relevant today. Just because someone sounds good on a podcast or a TED Talk doesn't mean they know physics.
Exactly. So Augustine is disillusioned. He's 29 years old. He's a teacher now, a professor of rhetoric, but he's frustrated. In Carthage, the students are unruly. They're basically rioting in the classrooms, disrupting lectures.
Sounds like a nightmare.
A total nightmare. So he packs up and moves to Rome.
Hoping for better students.
And he finds them. The Roman students are polite. They sit quietly. They take notes.
Oh.
But they have a different trick. They attend the whole term, and then on the day the fees are due, they all transfer to a different teacher. They just vanish.
The ancient version of the dine and dash? That is brutal.
It is. Augustine is broke, he gets sick with a fever, and he's completely cynical. But then he gets his big break.
Milan.
The imperial court in Milan, which was the de facto capital of the Western Roman Empire at the time, needs a professor of rhetoric.
These are the big leagues.
This is the top job.
Mm-hmm.
Augustine applies, he gives a test speech, and he wins the position. He heads north.
This is the pinnacle, right? This is like becoming the White House press secretary or the chief speechwriter for the president.
It is the path to political power. He is 30 years old, and he is the official voice of the empire. He is in the inner circle. And this is where everything changes. Because in Milan, he meets Ambrose.
Bishop Ambrose. Now, Augustine goes to hear Ambrose speak, but not because he's interested in Jesus.
No, not at all. He goes as a professional critic. He's a rhetoric professor. And Ambrose has a reputation as a great orator. Augustine wants to see if the man is any good. He's analyzing his style, his diction, his delivery. He's not even listening to the words at first.
But the content starts to seep in.
It does, because Ambrose was an intellectual heavyweight. He was fluent in Greek. He'd read the Neoplatonist philosophers like Plotinus, and he interpreted the Old Testament allegorically.
What does that mean exactly?
It means all those stories Augustine thought were crude and literal. You know, God walking in the garden, patriarchs with multiple wives. Ambrose explained them as metaphors for the soul's journey or for deeper theological truths.
So he made Christianity intellectually respectable for Augustine.
He did. Suddenly, Christianity didn't look so stupid to Augustine. It looked profound. It looked intellectually robust. Ambrose becomes this father figure he never really had.
But just as his mind is opening up, his personal life completely crashes.
This is the tragic part of the story. His mother, Monica, has followed him to Milan. She is relentless, and she is determined to see her son successful and saved. And in her mind, that means a respectable marriage.
Right.
So she arranges a marriage for him to a 10-year-old heiress from a noble Christian family.
10 years old.
It was legal at the time, though she would have to wait 2 years to be of marriageable age, which was 12.
Ew.
It's shocking to us. But to make this match, Augustine has to clear the decks. He has to get rid of his partner, the mother of his son, the woman he's been with for 15 years.
And he does it.
He does. He sends her back to Africa. And his description of this in the Confessions is just heartbreaking. He writes that his heart, which clung to her, was racked, wounded, and bleeding.
It wasn't a cold decision. It tore him apart.
It destroyed him. But he did it for ambition and for his mother. And she, his partner, went back to Africa, vowing never to be with another man.
And the irony is he can't even wait the 2 years for the child bride.
No. He's so used to sexual intimacy that he takes another concubine to fill the gap. It's a moment of total moral chaos for him.
He must have been disgusted with himself.
Completely. He realizes he is a slave to his own desires. He's ambitious, he's heartbroken, and he's disgusted with himself. This is when he prays that famous, agonizingly honest prayer.
Grant me chastity and continence, but not with.
Yeah, it's such a human prayer. I want to be good, I really do. Just let me have a little more fun first, or maybe more charitably. I don't think I have the strength to do it yet.
It's the ultimate procrastination of the soul, but the crisis reaches a breaking point. It's August, 386 AD.
Yes.
Augustine is in a garden in Milan. He's with his friend Alypius, and he is agonizing. He's just torn in two. He's crying, asking, "How long, O Lord? Why not now? Why not make an end to my ugly sins right now?"
He describes it as a battle between two wills inside himself. One old and carnal, one new and spiritual, and the old one is winning.
And then the voice?
He hears a child's voice coming from a nearby house. He says it was like a chanting, a sing-song voice. "Talale, talale, talale."
Take up and read. Take up and read.
Right. He stops. He thinks, is this a game? But he's never heard a game where kids say that. He takes it as a divine command, a direct message.
Sort of like opening a book at random for guidance.
Exactly. It was a practice called sortes biblicae. He rushes back to the bench where he left a book of St. Paul's letters. He snatches it up, opens it at random, and his eyes fall on Romans 13.13-14.
Which says, What?
Not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires.
It hits him like a lightning bolt.
It does. It addresses his specific struggle, lust, ambition, the flesh, so directly. He says a light of confidence flooded his heart, and all the darkness of doubt vanished. It was instant.
Just like that. The struggle was over.
The struggle was over. He walks away from it all. The career, the heiress, the ambition.
He resigns his professorship.
He does, citing a lung ailment. He is baptized by Ambrose the following Easter, along with his son Adeodatus. They decide to go back to Africa to live a quiet monastic life of study and prayer.
But the tragedy isn't over.
No, the universe is not done with him. While they are waiting for the ship at the port of Ostia, his mother Monica falls ill and dies.
After everything she did to get him to this point, she doesn't get to see him live out his new life.
It's incredibly poignant. They share a beautiful final conversation about heaven, and then she's gone. And then shortly after they return to Africa, his brilliant son Adeodatus dies as well.
He's left alone.
He's lost his partner, his mother, and his son in the space of about 2 years. It is a lot of loss.
I can't even imagine.
And it shapes him. He sells his inheritance, gives the money to the poor, and turns his family home into a monastery. He just wants to pray and read, but the local church in Hippo needs a priest.
And they have other plans for him.
They do. The bishop is old and he needs help. One day, Augustine is just in the church, and the congregation basically grabs him, presents him to the bishop, and they ordain him against his will. He was weeping.
Against his will seems to be a theme in church history.
It happens a lot. A few years later, he becomes the Bishop of Hippo. And this is where Augustine, the theologian, the one who shapes the next millennium, really emerges. He spends the rest of his life fighting battles, intellectual battles.
Let's talk about the big one, the battle over grace, because this is where he earns the title Doctor of Grace, and his opponent is a guy named Pelagius.
Pelagius, a fascinating character. In many ways, Pelagius is the opposite of Augustine. He was a British monk, an ascetic, very disciplined, very moral.
And his view was what?
His view was essentially optimistic about human nature. He believed humans have total free will. We are born innocent, just like Adam before the fall. Sin is just a bad habit that we pick up from society.
So if you try hard enough...
If you try hard enough, you can stop sinning and be perfect. You don't need God's special help to be good. You just need willpower. God gave you the rules. Now it's up to you.
That sounds very modern, like a self-help guru. You can do it. Unleash your best self.
It is very appealing. It's the religion of the strong, the disciplined. But Augustine looks at his own life, the pear theft, the addiction to lust, the give me chastity but not yet. And he says, no, that is not how it works. That is a fantasy.
Augustine argues that we are fundamentally broken.
Yes. He develops the doctrine of original sin. He argues that human nature was fundamentally wounded by the fall of Adam. It's not just that we do bad things, it's that our very nature is flawed. We have an inherited defect.
He talks about concupiscence. That's a great Scrabble word. What does it mean?
It essentially means uncontrollable desire. It's often linked to sexual desire because that's where we most obviously lose rational control. But for him, it's broader. It's the fundamental self-centered drive that pulls us away from God and towards ourselves.
And because of this, our will isn't really free.
That's his point. Our will is damaged. It's in bondage to sin. We are not free to choose the good on our own because we're naturally curved in on ourselves. We will always choose the self-serving thing.
So if we are enslaved, how do we get out?
That's the key. We can't get ourselves out. We need grace. Augustine argues that we are a massa damnata.
A mass of perdition, a condemned lump. That's German.
It's bleak. But his point is that the only reason anyone is saved is because God, out of sheer mercy and for his own mysterious reasons, reaches down and saves them. It's a gift. It's grace.
And this leads to the scary doctrine, predestination.
It does. It's the logical conclusion. If we can't choose God, then God must choose us. Augustine argues that God, before time, selects the elect to be saved. And it's not because they are better people. It's a mysterious, unilateral decision by God.
That is a tough pill to swallow. It seems so unfair.
It is. But for Augustine, it was actually a relief. It meant his salvation didn't depend on his own shaky willpower. It depended entirely on the sovereign power of God. It was a source of humility and security for him.
So we have the internal battle for the soul. But then, the external world starts falling apart. 410 AD. The Visigoths sack Rome.
This was a 9/11 moment for the ancient world, but magnified 1,000 times.
Yeah?
For 800 years, Rome had been the eternal city. It was invincible. And now barbarians were looting the capital. It sent shockwaves across the entire empire.
And the pagans started pointing fingers, right?
Immediately, they said, look, we abandoned the old gods who made Rome great. We started worshiping this Christian god, and now look what happened. Jupiter is angry.
And Christians were freaking out, too.
They were terrified. They thought, if Rome falls, does the church fall? Is this the end of the world? The fate of the church and the empire seemed completely intertwined.
Augustine's response is his masterpiece, The City of God.
The Civitate Dei. It is a massive work. It took him 13 years to write, and his argument is brilliant. He says, stop panicking. He posits that there have always been two cities, invisible, intermingled throughout history, the earthly city and the city of God.
What's the difference?
The earthly city is based on the love of self, to the point of contempt for God. It's driven by pride, lust for domination. Empires like Rome, Babylon, Egypt, they all belong to this city, and because they are built on human pride, they are destined to crumble. They all die eventually.
And the City of God?
The City of God is ruled by the love of God, to the point of contempt for self. It is humble, and it is eternal. Augustine says that Christians are citizens of the City of God who are just passing through the earthly city. We are resident aliens.
So if Rome falls...
It doesn't ultimately matter. It's just another building in the earthly city burning down. The city of God endures forever.
That is such a powerful shift in perspective. It basically detaches the fate of Christianity from the fate of any political power.
Precisely. It allowed the church to survive the Dark Ages. When the empire collapsed, the church stood because Augustine had given them the intellectual framework to say, we are something different. Our citizenship is in heaven.
But speaking of the earthly city, Augustine also had to deal with the messy reality of politics and war. He's the father of just war theory, isn't he?
He is. Personally, Augustine was a pacifist. He hated violence. But he recognized that in a fallen world, sometimes force is necessary to prevent a greater evil or to restore peace.
So he laid out some ground rules.
Yes. He argued a war must be defensive. It can't be for glory or conquest. It must be authorized by a legitimate authority, not just some rogue general. And its goal must always be a just and lasting peace. You fight reluctantly to restore order.
That sounds reasonable. But then we get to the Donatist controversy and things get darker.
This is the part of Augustine's legacy that makes modern people, myself included, very uncomfortable.
So who are the Donatists?
The Donatists were a rival Christian sect in North Africa. They were rigorists. They believed that if a priest or bishop had been a traitor during the Roman persecutions, handed over Bibles to be burned, his sacraments were invalid.
So if a bad priest baptized you, it didn't count. You weren't really baptized.
Right. It made the grace of the sacrament dependent on the moral purity of the minister. Augustine argued against this. He said the validity comes from Christ, not the priest's purity. Christ is the one acting.
But the Donatists weren't just arguing. They were violent.
Extremely. They had bands of enforcers called circumcellions who would roam the countryside, beating Catholic priests with clubs, throwing acid in their eyes, committing terrorism. It was essentially a religious civil war.
And for years, Augustine tried dialogue. He tried to win them over.
He did. He debated them, he wrote letters, he pleaded with them. But it didn't work. The violence continued. And eventually, he changed his mind.
Wow.
He looked at a parable in Luke 14 where the master of the feast sends his servant out and says, compel intrare, compel them to come in so that my house may be full. And Augustine used this to justify state coercion.
He used the government to crush the Donatists.
He advocated for fines, flogging, and banishment. He didn't want them executed. He actually argued against the death penalty for them. But he believed that fear could break the habit of heresy. He thought that if you forced them back into the church, they would eventually be exposed to the truth and be grateful.
A loving correction, he called it.
Yes, but it set a dangerous precedent. Later in history, during the Inquisition, persecutors would quote Augustine to justify burning heretics at the stake. It's a heavy, dark shadow on his legacy.
Let's pivot to something a little more abstract, his mind. Augustine thought about things that nobody else was really touching, like time.
Oh, Book 11 of the Confessions.
Yeah.
It is a philosophical tour de force. It's breathtaking. Augustine asks a simple question. What was God doing before he created the world?
The classic answer is preparing hell for people who ask deep questions.
Augustine actually mentions that joke. He says he won't give that glib answer. His real answer is mind-bending. He says there was no before. God created time itself along with the universe. Time is a feature of the created world. God is outside of time in an eternal present. So asking what God was doing before time is like asking what's north of the North Pole. The category doesn't apply.
That is basically modern physics, space-time.
It's astonishingly modern. And then he analyzes our experience of time. He says the past doesn't exist anymore. It's just memory. The future doesn't exist yet. It's just expectation.
The only thing that is real is the present.
Right, which is a razor-thin moment of attention. He concludes that time is a distension of the mind. It's a psychological experience. It's something that happens inside us.
That is trippy. And he applies this rigorous thinking to science and scripture, too.
He does. He wrote a whole book on the literal interpretation of Genesis, and it's fascinating. He warned Christians against talking nonsense about science.
What was his warning?
He basically said, if you talk about astronomy or biology and claim it's from the Bible, but you're clearly wrong, and any educated pagan knows you're wrong, they will laugh at you. And then they won't believe you when you talk about the resurrection of the dead.
Don't make the faith look foolish.
Exactly. And he himself did not believe the world was created in 6 literal 24-hour days.
He didn't.
No. He thought God created everything instantaneously in a set of seminal reasons, like seeds. He thought the 6-day narrative in Genesis was a literary framework, a way to categorize creation to help our limited human minds understand it.
Okay, we need to talk about his views on society, because some of them are, well, they're complicated. Let's start with sex.
Augustine has a reputation for being the guy who made Christianity terrified of sex. And there is some truth to that, but it's nuanced.
What's the nuance?
He believed that sex itself was good in principle. God invented it for procreation. It was part of the original design. But he argued that after the fall, sex is always accompanied by libido, shameful lust, concupiscence.
The thing he struggled with his whole life.
Exactly. Even in marriage, he thought that because you lose rational control during the act, there is something slightly off about it now. It's a sign of our fallenness. He went so far as to believe that original sin is actually transmitted from generation to generation through sexual intercourse.
Yikes. So that definitely colored Western theology for a long, long time.
It did. But then we also have to look at his view on women. On one hand, he held the typical view of the time that women were physically subject to men just as the body is subject to the mind. But spiritually, he was a radical egalitarian for his time. He believed women had the same rational mind and the same capacity for God as men. He had deep intellectual friendships with many women, starting with his mother. He saw them as equals in the soul.
And slavery.
This is another tough one. He didn't call for the abolition of slavery. He saw it, like war, as a tragic result of sin. God didn't intend for man to rule over man, but he didn't try to overturn the system.
So what did he advise?
He urged masters to treat their slaves with love, as family. And he famously wrote a letter to the emperor urging him to ban the slave trade of children because desperate parents were selling them. He saw the suffering, even if he accepted the institution as a fact of a fallen world.
And finally, his view on the Jewish people. This was really influential.
It was. This is the witness theory. In a time when many Christians thought Jews should be forcibly converted or worse, Augustine argued that they must be protected.
Why?
He said the Jewish people are witnesses to the truth of the prophecies about Jesus. Their existence and their preservation of the Old Testament scriptures proves the antiquity of the Bible, so they should be allowed to survive and practice their faith.
Survive but not thrive is a phrase sometimes associated with this.
That phrase itself isn't in his writings, though it's often used to summarize the later effect of his policy. He didn't want them holding positions of authority over Christians, but he argued passionately against violence toward them. It provided a theological safety net for Jews in Europe for centuries, although a very precarious one.
So we come back to the end. The Siege of Hippo.
430 A.D. The Vandals are burning the countryside. Augustine is dying inside the city walls, and he spends his final days revising his own works. He writes a book called Retractation.
Reconsideration.
Exactly. He goes through his entire life's work, book by book, and points out where he thinks he was wrong or where he would say things differently now.
He reviews his own books and admits his mistakes. How many intellectuals do that?
It's an incredible act of intellectual humility. It's a final confession, really.
He dies on August 28th, 430.
And shortly after, the Vandals breach the walls. They burn the city to the ground.
Total destruction.
Almost total. But, and this is almost miraculous, they leave the cathedral and Augustine's library untouched.
The man dies, but the mind survives.
And that mind shapes the next 1,000 years. Martin Luther was an Augustinian monk. The entire Reformation was basically a giant fight over Augustine's ideas on grace and free will.
And Descartes.
Descartes' famous, "I think, therefore I am." Augustine said something almost identical. Si faller, sum. If I am deceived, I am. Centuries earlier, as an argument against skeptics. The line of influence is just immense.
He really is the architect.
He is.
So what does this all mean for us? Here is a provocative thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
Before Augustine, autobiographies were about what you did. I fought this war, I built this city. They were resumes. Augustine, in the Confessions, wrote about what he felt, what he thought, his inner turmoil. He invented the inner self, that introspective voice in your head that narrates your life, that asks, who am I really? Why did I do that?
That's true. When you look in the mirror and analyze your own motives or struggle with your own contradictions, you are asking an Augustinian question.
We are all, in a way, living in the house that Augustine built.
In many, many ways, we are.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.